Hey there, scholars. How are we doing? Okay. Aristotle today. I'm going to try not to look out the window because these weird videos I've been making, looking out the window when I should be talking to you. Anthony Kinney's one of the greatest Aristotelian scholars, and Aristotle and the Perfect Life. You know, that's sort of the thing that makes Aristotle so powerful. He really is interested in human flourishing, and how we humans do best as thinkers, as observers, as people in communities, who we are. He does so much. He's incredible. And we're gonna look at him in primarily the terms of human flourishing, in terms of politics, polis, and the ix on the polis, meaning the stuff of the polis. You take your Aristotle's Politics, and I gave you the Dover edition here, and I've scribbled in it too much. This thing's falling apart. But this Dover edition is cheap, it's wonderful, and I really like the little things above, where you can follow, parts of a household. Slavery, necessary, and then slavery, justified. Slavery, is it natural? These are going to be big issues for us, but I like these headings. And so follow those headings, and they'll help guide you as to what's going on. Aristotle's hard to read. Aristotle, each book's a little different, but the Politics, one of the theories of the Politics is that it was put together by his students, sort of like take all of your notes from my class and then someone bundle them together, and that's how it reads. It's hard to read. Aristotle actually contradicts himself a lot. The book's not unified. The book is it asks questions. The greatness of Aristotle is that he pokes at the great questions, and then he tries that, and try that, and then he'll throw up his arms and just head off into another direction and not come to a conclusion on something, and that's what makes him great. This is not a manual on how to build a state. This is the study of the issues, and raises all of the major questions and all the major issues. Okay, where did we learn already in Solon? One of the great Greek traditions, one of the great Christian traditions, biblical tradition, is that what makes a good government is how it treats the poor, how it handles slavery, how it handles, family. Well, dang it, how does this book start? Slavery, family, household, property, basic issues like that, and then it starts there. And then where does this book end? How does this book end? Music. Talking about music, okay? Public education and music. From slavery to music. That's what this book makes. It's way confusing to too many people. A lot of people want to make it into something that it's not. It's not some big... anyone who says to you, Aristotle says, you should probably say, Aristotle says a lot of things. Show me the quote. The thing is that, people say, Aristotle will say one thing in one book, and then he'll contradict it, and he'll say something in ethics, or he has a couple different ethics books, and then he has the politics, and he contradicts himself. And women confuse him, and we'll talk about it in here. Marriage confuses him. These are issues which are unresolvable in the modern world, and they're unresolvable to him. So he's fascinating in the sense of, I think he's very modern. At the same time, he's ancient of days, And so this is the fun of reading him. And, he's called a peripatetic. His followers are called the peripatetic. And that's because peripateo, that means to walk. So he apparently walked while his students sort of ran behind him, maybe, writing down. He's sitting there thinking these big thoughts. And so if you picture him walking, and students running behind him writing down, especially, this sort of stuff, grabbing a few quotes and stuff and little passages and things like that. And then someone putting it together, gluing and pasting and cutting and all that sort of stuff. And then the fun thing is that this work and others of his ethics and stuff like that were buried for about 100 years until they were redug up by the Romans. I mean, Plato wrote these beautiful sort of theatrical dialogue, big fat book, Plato's dialogues, and Socrates is always wise, and they sort of go back and forth. And it's like going to the theater for Plato. Aristotle is not going to the theater. It's the chasing behind this guy running along, and coming up with ideas and asking big questions, and then realizing that it's hard to read. And so, bottom line is, read it. It's a good book. Aristotle is, he's in pursuit of the right things, and he is as living today as he was when he died, man. He sets the questions and asks them in ways that have never been really figured out. Now, but these questions are always pointing in the right direction. That's the thing. Everything he's doing. Now, this is the other thing about reading this book. You and me, I suppose, but I've fought it all my life. You and me are born into a cynical world in which we think immediately, okay, if he says this, how can we twist that to our advantage? Well, this is where he has that mosaic principle that we've talked about, which is, Moses says, the poor will always be, he says there should be no poor. The poor will always be with you. And you, what are you supposed to do is not be tight-fisted. You're not supposed to take advantage. And Aristotle is always the optimist. In politics, he's never talking about abusing the system. It's always like, if there is slavery, he's not thinking at all about sexual oppression and all the stuff we know went on, young girls being raped and all sorts of, horrible things and people being killed and worked to death and stuff like that. No. If there is slavery, and slavery is at all necessary in society, you have to have in the back of your mind that Aristotle believes it's somehow good. And that's the way you read the book, okay? Everything is in the good. And he does this in the first sentence, First sentence, got it here. Good old Aristotle there. There's Aristotle there. That's not as good. About that in Greece, but not as good as there. That's a better head. These are what the Roman sort of statues made him look like. But every state, this translation, every state is a community of some kind, and every community is established for some good. Politics has to be for the good. And, there's different translations. Every polis, every state, every city is a community, is a fellowship. The word he uses is a koinonia and agathu. Hard to translate exactly, but it's a fellowship of the good. This is the same wording that gets used by Paul a lot. And the church is a fellowship, a koinonia, and this is a koinonia and agathu. Indeed, the telos, the end. See, this teleology, this purpose of a polis is the good life, the full and independent life, which in our view constitutes a happy and noble life. That's in the beginning of book 3 when he starts back in on so we'll get there. So here again in book 3, political fellowship exists not merely for the sake of noble actions. Exists for the sake of noble actions, not merely for living in common, okay? And he'll, make it very clear in here that we are a city, a state, a government is not there to make you safe. It's to help you be good. And this is where Aristotle is not modern. He's not modern to the modern United States in the sense that our presidents now are expected to keep us safe. I recently heard this from Donald Trump. I've heard this from every president since 9/11. But also, it's just become the thing, is presidents are supposed to keep us safe. And then you have all this expectation that because of this virus that's out there, that somehow the government didn't keep us safe. Aristotle says government's not there to keep us safe. Okay. Also, government is not there to make us rich. Okay. Wealth is there's a productivity and everything, but that should be at the family level, the local level, and stuff like that. Government is there to make us good. Okay. And he also says government's not there to necessarily to be strong. It's not about, Sparta is not his model of good government in this book. It's not a great military power. It's not your GNP. It's not almost everything we judge the United States by and pat ourselves on the back for, Aristotle would think is the wrong idea. Does government make us good or help us to be good? Facilitate goodness. See, every state is a fellowship, is a community of some kind. Every community is established with a view to some good. Okay. Now, I want to talk about, first of all, is the way the book is structured here. This book 1 is about the household. And as you get into it, as you jump right into it, the household is not the state. A household is run, in this where he talks about marriage and family, is a household is run as a sort of royalty, as a monarchy, it's a family, and that's what. So dad is dad and mom is mom, and they don't have term limits. They're not popular sovereignty in the family. It's good. It's where love dominates, and it's where love is supposed to keep everything working and holding together. It's a system of mutual responsibilities and stuff like this. And this is why slavery is part of the household. Earning of property is part of the household. Your relationships between parents and husband, wife, that's all part of the household. It's all within this world of love, okay? And there's going to be another kind of love, a friendship love, a Philadelphia love for the state that's going to hold the fellowship together. But that's a different kind, and that fellowship love of the state, the friendship love of the state, is where you still recognize that power corrupts. Governments tend to get corrupt, and so you need to have a sort of, he talks about mixed government, and then he talks about popular sovereignty and things like that. So we'll get there. Let's start with the household here, and just want to jump right in. First and foremost is that states are made up of households. But that the main thing is that man is a political animal. Humans are, he says, if you think you can live alone, you're either a beast or a god, okay? Humanity flourishes in relationships. There's a certain obvious sense to this, in the sense that procreation and creativity of more human beings and stuff like that requires relationships. You can't do this by yourself, So there's humans are political animals. If you want to go live in a van and go surfing in Baja California and by yourself, I suppose you can do it. Read Thoreau, read Taoist literature. Don't take your Aristotle with you, because Aristotle isn't meant for you living alone in your van, surfing your way across Baja. Aristotle's for how you live in a family, in a church, in a community, and how you participate. Okay? So, man is a political animal. And then he jumps right in with slavery, which is you think, wow, start with slavery. But that's that issue is that how you treat your weakest members is the foundation of good government. It's the basic definition of good government in the Greek tradition especially. And so you start, that gives us a coloring. So he is not talking about how to mistreat slaves or how to abuse slaves or how to get your most efficiency out of slaves. He is talking about, should slavery exist? Since freedom is the goal, the free person is this best citizen. A slave, what is a slave? And so he goes into this, and he comes down with the idea that slavery is necessary. Notice that he asks the question. Most people in the world don't even ask the question. Is slavery natural? Is it necessary? Well, he's asking that question. And in his answer's been one of the hardest to deal with throughout history, especially like when you talk about slavery in America with the plantations and stuff. But how Aristotle treats slavery is just this, his authority is so important. So I give you this example, which comes from the early 16th century, when Charles V, who is the Holy Roman Emperor, the Carlos I of the Spanish Empire, he is the most powerful person in the world, and his people of his, those conquistadors have gone over there and Cortez and such conquered Mexico, and he raises it. The question is raised. What about the Indians? Now, the slave, his mother or his grandmother, Isabella, and him, he's very committed to not enslaving Indians. On the other hand, he has advisors and stuff who are saying, no, Aristotle says that slavery is okay. And then this would actually facilitate economics, all sorts of stuff, let's create the Indians in the Americas as a slave class. So we're talking a whole continent of people here under the Spanish Empire. Should we legally make them slaves? And Las Casas is a missionary, and he's actually saying the kind of things that Charles wants to hear. But Las Casas declared flatly that Sepulveda did not understand Aristotle. In fact, he absolutely misunderstood the philosopher. See, the key here of this example is that, okay, the slave, whether the Indians of the New World are going to be treated as slaves, hinges on Aristotle and debating what this book said. This is just, think about this. Here's the most powerful people in the world, the most powerful emperors in the world, the great debate happening in front of them, and they don't sit there and go, what do I want to do? They say, what would Aristotle point us toward? What did Aristotle say? And Aristotle will lead us in the right direction. Sepulveda is saying Aristotle says that slavery is natural, which he's not saying to, it's good, let's create a slave class. Las Casas is saying, the missionary coming back, he's saying, no, you misunderstand Aristotle on slavery. Well, and read this in here. It's easy to misunderstand Aristotle on slavery. Aristotle contradicts himself and basically doesn't come up with a clear idea. However, there is, Las Casas clearly does sort of, I think, have a good picture of what Aristotle is saying. Las Casas does not contest the Aristotelian theory of natural slavery, but he believes, this is the author I took this from, slaves are few in number and must be considered as mistakes of nature, like men born with 6 toes or only 1 eye. Yes, but I would go so further is to say people who cannot live fully as free people, can't fully participate in society, those are the people that Aristotle is calling natural slaves. And I think in here they actually use the term monsters. But just don't worry about the translations here. But this a monstrous birth, this was translated in the 18th century by, who's the guy? It's a good translation. 19th century by Jowett. Is it Jowett's translation? No. I'll figure that out. I thought it was, but what Aristotle is saying is that slavery is for people who need it. Okay, it's necessary for people who need it. And if you think in this way, like most children under 18 are a type of slave status. They don't have full freedom. People under 16 are forced to go to school. They don't have full freedom, there's a period of time where developmentally where people need to. So if you're stuck in a developmental sort of childish state, you need a household to take care of you. And so you're given jobs, you work for this, but that's a natural slave. Now there's other slaves too. There's slaves who are captured and bought and all this other sort of stuff. But the natural slavery that Aristotle talks about, and is it necessary? That question, which seems so harsh, isn't really. I don't think it needs to be treated hard. I interpret it like Las Casas. Read the stuff. You'll be able to say, I read Aristotle on this. A lot of people say Aristotle says, and they have never read Aristotle. Believe me, you run into it all the time, especially among your fellow professors and stuff. There's lots of professors who say Aristotle says, but they haven't read it. Okay, so let's move on to he goes on and to the rules of the household and property and money making. And money making is you're not supposed to just it's not capitalism. You shouldn't just make as much money as you can. You're supposed to make a moderate amount of money. You're supposed to be wise about money making because the goal is happiness, and money doesn't make you happy. Now, the interesting thing here is about the husband and wife stuff is when you go to a section on the family is in 3 parts. Okay. Here's I have it here on this. Of the household management we've seen, there are 3 parts. One is the rule of master over slaves, and that's the basically mom and dad over the whole house, over the family over the slave class. And then he says the second is the father. And by that he means the father and mother. That's the basic definition of patriarchy over the family. Okay, and that's they rule. Okay, and then the third is the husband. See, so here's the husband-wife relationship. So this is and makes sense. The family is 3 different things at once. One is it's a type of, economic unit in which there's the family, the ruling over the slaves, the whole, all that make their living and life there in the household. And then there's the second, which is the more family relationship of mom and dad over children and their developmental responsibilities. And then those children are going to be the ones that inherit the property and stuff like that. And this is a relationship that's, that St. Paul talks about. It's the folks being adopted from one status over here into the children's status, the Christians being adopted into the family of God. But then the third status is this husband-wife relationship, which he points out it has to do with equality. Husband and wives are equal in the sense that they have a constitutional legal relationship. 2 families coming together, there's a contract to it. Like I have a contract with my wife, that's legally binding, and you have to go to court to get it broken, which is called divorce and stuff like that. So there's a contract, and as a contractual, and he calls it a constitutional level, it has equality in it. Okay? So he actually raises the issue of equality in marriage, and he talks about then the idea that there is this equality, but on the other hand, it is a patriarchal system that he's normally writing in. But he raises the issue of equality in marriage and the contractualism, and that will be an important thing throughout history to justify how queens can take over for their husband's role as king, when you don't have to necessarily in all societies go down to a male. People like Queen Elizabeth, will the first, in England will justify their rights as queen on the basis of Aristotle said that in this sort of relationship of husband and wife, there's a type of equality in which the woman can step in. It's a very interesting thing I think he does there. And so read that part. These are interesting parts. And what you want to do is give him the benefit of the doubt as you're reading him. Don't immediately assume the harshest, most negative way of understanding him. But that's book one. Book one's about the household. Book two's about sort of utopias. That Plato... this is Plato here with his finger. He's a sort of utopian thinker. Mathematics is the type of utopian way of thinking, And so he talks about urban architecture, Aristotle does, and how, Piraeus is laid out in grids, This is a stupid way to lay out maps, is in grids, but we do it all over. And it's grids actually don't work on a curved surface. We all know the Earth is a globe, but we still use grids to lay out streets and stuff. And it causes huge problems when you're dealing over large amounts of space. And this is, Aristotle points out, sort of just one aspect of the problem of utopian thinking. Plato wants sort of communism, shared property. He wants shared wives on that Spartan model and stuff like that. The Spartan model is not a workable model because it tries to destroy family. And family and households is really is the foundation of the state. Okay, so this is where he's commonsensical, and then Plato is sort of utopian, and so he calls it unnatural, and maybe that's the way to end this section right now. Is that what is natural is what's better for Aristotle, because he has that optimism about the creation is fundamentally best. The way things run in nature is, and by nature, and easiest commonsensical, that the common sense is an Aristotelian foundational term, commonsensical way of thinking of what you can observe. This is the best way to think and observe, run things, and government should not be utopian. It shouldn't be something that's sort of created in your head. And Sparta was a place that was created in your head. He talks about Spartan women here as being sort of a dysfunctional women, and that's because Sparta is part of a utopia, and utopias don't work well. So we'll talk more about Aristotle, but that's a good opening to him. And patting myself on the back, is that book one and book two, and so. A great beginning, and then with book three, we jump back into the state, and then the rest of the book, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, is about the state, and it ends with public education and the need for a state to do education of its citizens. And okay, so take care.